Hello out there, Facebook. Hello, Reason. Hello, Internet. Hello, world. I am Matt Welch from Reason, editor-at-large. I am standing here at the Gary Johnson, William Weld Victory Party here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I'm standing next to the national chair of the Libertarian Party, Nicholas Sarwark, who's going to help us through a little bit about what we're watching, what it means, and what it means for the Libertarian Party in particular. Nicholas, hello.
Hi, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
Welcome to the land of enchantment.
Is it so? Is this a champagne night? Is this a IPA night? What is your contextual take of what tonight means for the Libertarian Party as the national chair?
It's absolutely a win. We have half the results in right now. Already, Gary is posting numbers that are 2 and 3 and 4 times the numbers that we've gotten in 2012, and 2012 was already the high water mark for vote numbers in the United States. So this is a win for the Libertarian Party, and it's a win for the Libertarian Party going forward into 2018 and 2020.
Now, so Bob Barr, 2008, gets 0.4% of the vote. Gary Johnson last time around gets 1.0. We don't know what's going to happen tonight. It's going to be, 4 something, 5 something, hopefully. But that is a pretty, strong progression. As you have looked at the progression of third parties in American history, can you identify an analog to something like that, where you stepped from here, you went there, and then you went there?
I think the best analog is going to be, it's hard to put the analog on because you have to look at the overall context of what else is going on. So it's not just our progression in numbers, which you could find some analogs in other parties, but it's also what's happening in the old parties and the crack-up that we're about to see within the Republican Party, and potentially a crack-up within the Democratic Party with nominating unpopular, sort of corrupt and crazy candidates. The people don't feel represented anymore, and they're leaving those old parties in droves. So there's a real opportunity for more of an exponential growth curve than the steady progression up. And that's how political parties work in a first-past-the-post system, is once you create this uncertainty by covering the spread in a lot of races, everything starts to change real fast. And that's when it gets fun.
So this is a weird year. It's a weird political year. We haven't really seen... We've never seen a Donald Trump before, for crying out loud. And there's been a lot of sort of black swan events. Could it also be a black swan high point for the Libertarian Party? Are you worried about okay, this is the best that we could do under these great circumstances, but maybe that progression isn't going like this? Oh,
1.2 million.
I don't know if y'all can hear that. Do you want to repeat that?
As of just a few minutes ago, we have beaten the 1.2 million vote record set in 2012.
So this is the high water part for the Libertarian Party. We're hearing about it live, which is pretty amazing for the Libertarian Party.
So repeat your question before that, because you had one.
Right. So could this be a blip? Could this be a black swan year for the Libertarian Party? And in that context, could it be judged as a failure? This was the best possible context you could have had, and you bastards still only got 5%.
Absolutely not. If you look at the trend lines for voter registration numbers going back to 2012 to now, with partisan registration, with Libertarians being the only ones growing, if you look at the progression in vote totals over time, running different kinds of candidates, Barr, Badnarik, Johnson, we've tried all the things, we're still growing. And a lot of what it comes down to is we haven't hitched our wagon to any personality. The Libertarian Party's success is not hinged upon Gary Johnson. It's not hinged upon a personality in a way that, say, a Ralph Nader or a Ross Perot were the driving forces behind their parties. And then when they got tired of politics or were no longer popular, the party went away. We're doing the hard work organizing in all 50 states in the District of Columbia. We're running those local candidates up and down the ballot in the off years. We're doing all the things that Dan Savage apparently can't figure out we're doing.
We're on Facebook Live. I'm with the chair of the Libertarian Party, Nicholas Sarwark. We're going to get to your questions in a second. Bring them all here. I got a few more to ask before we get to them. Talk a little bit about that. You're beating the Green Party like gong in the state of Washington, in Dan Savage's state of Washington, when you would imagine that everyone would be a Green just by right of birth. What are some of the things that people should be looking at tonight as the election returns are coming in? What are some races? What are some just things, facts, numbers that are of interest to you?
Well, I mean, we're going to break all the records. We're probably going to do better in every single state, or a vast majority of states all around the country. But we're also having a lot better down ballot candidates. If you look at, for example, Mark Miller, who's running for Railroad Commission in Texas, he's been endorsed by every newspaper that I know of in Texas that actually endorses. The Dallas paper, the Fort Worth paper, the Houston paper, they're all endorsing him for this job, which is being on the commission that regulates oil and gas in Texas, because we have the most qualified candidate for that office. So his race is going to be one to watch, to see how many people will break out of straight party voting and actually vote for a qualified candidate instead of for a corrupt crony Republican.
And how many, when I was looking at it in Washington and Nebraska, some of the kind of polished apple states of the Libertarian Party right now, they're just introducing more candidates by far than the Green Party. Is that normal countrywide? Is this sort of special to a few good states?
No, that's countrywide. The Green Party has pockets. They've got these little localities where they're really strong, but if you look across the board, there's no one that compares with the Libertarian Party. In many states, for example, Texas, up until, I know in the last election cycle, we ran more candidates than the Democrats did. So there are many states where we are the second party. We are not getting the vote totals yet because of a lot of entrenched corporate interests, and the money isn't there. But people are flocking to us because we keep showing up and offering them an alternative, especially in these very lopsided one-party states like Texas for the Republicans, or a Maryland or a Massachusetts for the Democrats.
What do we have going on here?
No idea.
They're really excited.
Bill Weld's in town.
They're really excited about John King on the screen in here. There's going from a 1% party to a 5% party. Let's just assume that happens. Yeah. We don't know if that's happening or not precisely. But there's a lot of growing pains associated with that. There's the people who've been fighting the ballot access wars forever, and then they see a lot of newcomers come in, and the newcomers, they're like, it's centrism.
Right.
It's a fiscally conservative, socially liberal. Let's go. There's a built-in tension there. How do you see that tension playing out? Is that a problem? Is that an opportunity? What is it?
It's absolutely an opportunity. I was watching on the other day Rabbi Twersky talking about how a lobster grows. And the way a lobster grows, they have a hard shell. They have a carapace. And so a lobster can't grow without the shell getting uncomfortable and having to actually go and break out of that shell. So that discomfort is where growth comes from. And so having these growing pains, having the problem of having a lot more money and supporters come into the Libertarian Party, having the problem of having an experienced politician decide that running on the Libertarian Party label is something that they're comfortable doing at this point in our political growth, is something that we should embrace. I mean, the Libertarians are strong. We've been doing this for 45 years. I think we can handle a little growth.
Are you one of those people trying to say, just suck it up and you're fine with Bill Weld people and stop complaining? Or are you kind of trying to play Switzerland? We're referring to, of course, him going on MSNBC and Rachel Maddow saying he's vouching for Hillary Clinton. He's a controversial pick at the Libertarian Convention. He squeaked by at the end. He also brought a lot of fundraising chops. Talk a little bit about kind of just the Weld effect as you live in it, the difference that he made on the ticket, pro, con, whatever.
So Bill Weld, no doubt, brought a lot of gravitas to the ticket, and he brought a lot of money to the ticket. And those were the things that he was promised to bring. So he delivered on what was promised at the convention. It was a close vote at convention, but it was a majority vote. Those are our rules. And as chairman of the party, my job is to, apply the will of the delegates and support the nominee of the delegates. So all the people who, when somebody says something they don't agree with on TV, go, hey, why don't you kick him off the ticket or kick him out of the party? Who are they to think that they know better than 1,000 people in the room selected by all the state parties from all around the country in Orlando? And why would they empower me to be the arbiter of who's a libertarian? Like, what do I know?
It should be clear here at home that Nicholas is the guy who beat the man boobs stripper guy for a chair there. Although, in fairness, he did resign as part of his act. James Weeks, who was running for sheriff.
Sheriff in Livingston County, Michigan. It does not look like from early returns he'll win the office, but he did present an alternative to a Republican who was otherwise running unopposed. And that's the sort of public service that people don't realize the Libertarians do. When you want somebody to stand up to one of these entrenched old parties and actually present a vision of smaller government and freedom, the Libertarian Party is the only one out there working for you. The Democratic Party won't do that. None of their politicians are going to take that shotgun blast to the face. And so, I get there's a lot of haters out there. It's the internet, whatever. But show a little love and show a little respect for those of us who are out in the trenches actually fighting for your rights.
Let's go to some questions here. Oh my God, you just undid the questions. It says, yeah, that's good. Matthew Iglesias from Vox.com says, congratulations to Florida's Gary Johnson voters on their work advancing the cause of liberty. I think he's being sarcastic, Nicholas. I'm not sure. Did they call Florida?
Is that somebody who matters?
That's a question that's open to.
Does he have a philosophy degree?
He went to
school up in
He went to Harvard.
Massachusetts?
No, but so what do you tell?
Gillette would say I have to say cock now.
What do you tell those people in the world who say the Libertarians just spoiled Florida and therefore possibly the country electing a horrible autocrat, Donald Trump?
I would tell them that you had 16 years to realize that you have to not run a shitty candidate to not lose.
That's pithy. Robert Ritchie asks, where do we go if we don't hit 5%? The results I'm seeing are worrying.
We go on to 2018 with more ballot access and more people running in the midterms, and we go on to 2020 to hit the 5% then.
Let's clear up some stuff. I think a lot of people at home have this assumption because people repeat it a lot in the media and elsewhere that 5% means everything goes away, the bad stuff goes away on ballot access nationally. That's not the case, as Nicholas, I'm sure, is going to correct me in a second. 5% is just a nice number. It is also the threshold number for a number of states, like a half a dozen individual states. So if you get beyond that, you get ballot access in 2018 or 2020 or something like that. But this thing is happening more at the state-by-state level. So what do you see that of the numbers so far that tells us about the ballot access on that state-by-state level?
So there are 17 states around the country where some vote total between 1% and 5% will do something good for us in ballot access. One of the things a lot of people don't realize about the Libertarian Party, in this last cycle, in order to put Gary Johnson on the ballot in all 50 states in the district, we spent approximately $750,000. That's the money we spent to run a race to be allowed to get to the starting point where the Republicans and Democrats start for free. That is what they call fair. So every state in those 17 where we get over that threshold, that's more money we can put into campaigning and actually presenting a pro-freedom message, and less money we have to waste on jumping through stupid hoops set up by our competition to keep us down. That's the biggest thing with the vote totals. Now, we're not seeing all of them yet. I know that one success we're almost guaranteed to have is we will likely become a major party in the state of New Mexico. Once we get over 5%, we will have automatic access to the gubernatorial ballot. We will be able to have primaries, and we'll be able to become a force here. And I think that's going to be a really huge success, where we're going to have some of these states where we're put on a level playing field with the Republicans and the Democrats, and they're going to find out that, having us fight with one hand tied behind our back is one thing, but letting us have the other hand free is another story altogether.
The 5 million or the 5% threshold is mostly key beyond helping on those individual states, and it triggers potentially taking some of the voluntary contributions that people check off on their income tax returns, like other parties, which could be maybe around like $10 million, which is a source of some controversy. Do you have a position on that controversy? Do you have a preview of how that controversy will play out the next time you guys all meet?
Yeah, so what it does is it makes our presidential candidate eligible to take presidential matching funds in 2020, assuming that system still exists. It's a system that was built for public financing of elections, but no old party candidate has used the system going back to, I think you have to go back to 2004 for the last old party candidate.
Yeah, Obama broke it.
Yeah, it's funny because John McCain didn't use it even though his name's on the stupid law. But the argument in the party is going to come down to this. We don't support taking taxpayer money to put it into politicians' pockets. We think that that's stupid and wrong. So do we want to take that taxpayer money to put it into our politicians' pockets? I think there'll be a debate at the 2018 convention in New Orleans, and the party will decide. They may make a bylaw about it. We may come to some resolution. We may say it's up to the judgment of the presidential candidate. There's a lot of reasons why the old party candidates don't take it, because you're signing yourself up for a bunch more just federal paperwork and red tape and limitations on what you can do and what you can say. And is that worth $10 million? I don't know. We raised over $10 million on the Johnson campaign without federal matching funds.
How does that compare dollar on dollar to 2012?
2012 was about 2.4 million. Last I checked, the Johnson campaign's running about 11.4 million. So an order of magnitude over. And one of the recent commenters, one of the ones that wasn't asking me to kill myself, did say something about how 66% of that is small donations, but even 34% of that is still twice as much as the Johnson campaign total in 2012. So Bill Weld did in fact deliver on his promise.
I just caught up with the math. It's a little bit difficult. Again, I'm Matt Welch from Reason. I'm here with Nicholas Sarwark from the Libertarian Party. He's the chair of the party. That screen over there that's asking your questions and communicating them to me is blank because of incompetence on the part of my colleagues over here. I'm just kidding, not incompetence. So I have a question. Please send them in as we're talking about the Libertarian Party and Gary Johnson tonight. Patrick Brown, is there a more viable candidate the party is eyeing for 2020, these people?
They're already getting ahead of the midterms. And much as I know about some people who are eyeing the nomination or doing exploratory stuff now, a lot of presidential politics has to deal with the ground that you're running on. So we need to see what the midterm elections look like, what the makeup of Congress looks like, how the president is doing at that point to determine who would be the best candidate to run in 2020. A lot of the advantages that Gary Johnson and Bill Weld had this election was the two old parties ran crazy hated people, so that the sort of sensible Republican governor of Democratic state reaching across the aisles, healing the partisan rifts thing and experience were a unique selling proposition. They were different from what the other candidates were running. If the election had turned out differently and the Republicans had nominated a governor, we would probably be in a different place.
Now, a lot of the kind of casual dismissals that you hear about the Libertarian Party have to do with it just being weird, acting differently. James Weeks, other people, moments when things go strange. You had a convention in which the top four finishers for president, the number 4 guy declared that he's going to be a write-in candidate despite the fact that he lost, Darrell W. Perry, in some amount of states, or making himself eligible to be a write-in candidate because he thinks that there should be an actual libertarian running for the party. The number 3 guy, John McAfee, is not endorsing Gary Johnson and says mean things about him. The number 2 guy, you and I were just watching here, Austin Peterson, who I'm sure in some people's minds is the presumptive early frontrunner of 2020, said, here's why I voted for Gary Johnson, a man I despise, just tonight. Is that kind of amateur hour? Is that feeding into this notion that there's some unruly cats running around? What's your kind of take on this being your party's procession of how to deal with a candidate?
I don't know. Did I miss a lot of party unity in the Republican Party? What was that? Is that what we're supposed to be aspiring to? How nice and kumbaya they were, where everybody just fell in line behind the nominee?
So you see this as a expression of intellectual health, that there would be this kind of vigorous dissension.
Here's the thing: the 4 people you mentioned all didn't win the nomination. The guy who they keep playing clips of on TV didn't win my job. So yeah, the people that lose are going to be bitter, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on in a campaign, and there's not a lot of love lost. It was a real knockdown dragout. You have to remember, we have real conventions where you really are fighting for votes. It's not a coronation. It's not decided. So you have actual floor work with people going and lobbying people. There's going to be some elbows thrown. For the most part, most people in the Libertarian Party got behind the choices that the delegates made, as they should. And a lot of the people who could get behind the choice, they worked for down-ballot candidates, as they should. Some people want to keep throwing shade. Some people were kind enough to wait until after the polls closed before they started throwing their shade. But I know there's no love lost between some of these people. It is what it is. What they have to realize is politics is a long game, and the Libertarian Party is not as big as maybe people think it is. And so the choices that they've made in this election cycle will be taken into account when they seek support for further office in later election cycles.
Very carefully said. Joel Mangrum here says, is there anything you would have done differently? I don't know if he means you. I don't know, maybe means Gary Johnson. Maybe means the party in general. But let's just open that up in an open sense. Was it something you would do differently?
Get more sleep. No, there's always stuff you can look back on and say, I wish I had done this. I wish I had done that. You know, when I flew out to New York for an 18-hour trip to film Stossel with, literally no sleep, I would do that differently. I'd take a little more time, try and spend a little more time with my family. But I think that this election has gone awesome. I think that the campaign has done great. There have been slip-ups, but there are always slip-ups. The former Secretary of State put Mosul on the border of Iraq for a minute in a debate, and nobody seemed to care about her geography problems. But I guess when you have a huge campaign, you care about whether or not my candidate's good at pub trivia. I don't know.
Do you think that there's like a weird man's burden, as I've tried to coin a phrase, and it just hasn't?
Coined that phrase?
I've tried really hard, super hard to try to make that happen.
That?
Like where you are
shirts, don't
you are asked to do too much, or you have to be twice as good, basically.
Absolutely. I mean, in all seriousness, that is a thing that's real. When African Americans were first starting to break over the color lines and get past Jim Crow and get past segregation, there was a sense that you had to not only be good enough, you had to be better. When women were first allowed to practice law, they had to not only be good enough, they had to be better. And that's where we are as libertarians. We are a minority. We are an often ridiculed and reviled minority. And so in order to succeed, we have to stand up and just be better. And that's what I'm trying to do. When it comes to being the chairman of a political party that's national, I think I'm doing better than the political operative from Kenosha or whoever in the rotating cast of characters hasn't had to resign from the DNC lately.
Let's be honest, it's a pretty low bar, particularly in this election cycle. More questions. Rebecca Babcock, any discussion about possibly holding the LP primary earlier in the season so the nominee could have more time to build support?
Yes, we have a convention window that goes back to some point in the year prior to the election year when we can hold our national convention. So we can nominate earlier. We used to nominate earlier. In 1983, the convention was held for the 1984 election cycle. A lot of that early stuff was for two reasons. It was either to get more press because you would have a nominee and you can build up momentum, but it was also because we didn't have ballot access in more places. So we need to have a lot of time to try and go out and gather the signatures to put our candidate on the ballot. As we get into a more robust national party scenario where we have fewer and fewer states we have to fight to get on the ballot, we start operating within the same political calendar as the two old parties. The problem really comes down to the math from the Commission on Presidential Debates, because their 15% threshold that they rigged the whole system with mathematically requires a name recognition of well over 80% in order to even possibly get there as someone from outside one of the two old parties without that inbuilt standard of support. So for math purposes, if they continue to have that hurdle, it might be worthwhile to start earlier, but it might be worthwhile to just delegitimize that clown show, because it's a rigged game run by Republicans and Democrats to make sure only Republicans and Democrats get to play. So why are we watching it anyway?
Talk a little bit about the number of people, or the phenomenon of major party people. I think it's been mostly Republicans, but correct me where I'm wrong, who are now switching and flipping and going Libertarian. It seems like there's been more of that, but maybe I've just been trying to pay attention to it more than I have before. People like Laura Epke and so on.
We're getting more defections as the Republican Party moves farther and farther away from the principles that it claimed to espouse for a long time. People who are really interested in individual liberty and limited government have to decide whether or not the pain from beating their head against the brick wall of the establishment Republican Party and the pain in their back from being stabbed by the establishment Republican Party and having to deal with the embarrassment of bigots and racists is worth it for whatever, they're in a major party, or whether they want to join a party that may be smaller but actually believes what they believe. Gary Johnson and Bill Weld have both talked about the best thing about running as Libertarian is it's better for their back because they don't have to carry all that social baggage.
Let's go to one more question here. Paul Gambill, question for Nick. Well, why not for me, Paul? What's going on? How is the National LP going to help the state LPs grow their grassroots base over the next 2 to 4 years?
So we have a full-time affiliate development specialist who goes out and works with state parties to help revamp their websites, get better organization, get better at fundraising, get to the point where they can have paid staff, help them recruit candidates. That's on a state-by-state basis. But we're also looking at doing some big data and analytics to identify supporters through various channels to bring them in and kind of jumpstart some of these state parties. You know, all the work that for me starts tomorrow is that building the ground game in the states, because my job is to build the Libertarian Party into a strong and robust and successful vehicle that can propel us forward. It's not the same job as a candidate, and I take my job very seriously.
All right. Well, thank you for giving us a serious look at what's going on tonight. Nicholas Sarwark, chair of the Libertarian National Party. I am Matt Welch, editor-at-large. Reason, goodbye, Facebook, and we'll see